Good morning, Bitcoiners. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. Boo boo bodacious. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Indeed. Good morning. What do we got from Boo Boo Bodacious? Sun just peeked over the hill. Great. Yeah, it's over the hills here. We're good. It's pretty confirmed up, right? I don't think we have to worry about no sunrise this morning. And I did you all the favor. I checked. Bitcoin's running, guys. We're good. There's nothing else going on in the world. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about all the other new stuff. And there's nothing going on today. You can always tell that the media and the newsrooms are on vacation and more or less dealing with the replacement summer intern staff right now. Oops, let me just get this. What's wrong with my chair? Well, it is indeed my anniversary today. I have been married to my wife for 8 years, so it's our 8-year wedding anniversary, but she's not here, so this is a shout out to her. She's in Montreal for the night visiting some friends, so but she'll be back around. We're gonna have a great time. I'm with the kids. Life is great. Who could complain, right? We got July 4th coming up. We just finished Canada Day. Kids are very, very entertained, and I think we're going to do a great show this morning, even without a lot of newsy news, right? Because they're all on vacation. So I've got some fun stuff to talk about today. Yeah, so Robert says, congrats. Thank you, Robert. The one thing I did was I put we did the day of our anniversary within all of these holidays. So we always knew kind of where we'd be and we'd have some time. But what it ended up doing was creating like a big demand on our time during these days. So kind of a bit... unintended consequences, which we're going to talk about today. Today's all about unintended consequences. So we're going to talk about unintended consequences. So it's thanks everyone for the congratulations. And yeah, I mean, you guys wouldn't believe, if you really saw it, you wouldn't even believe how great my life is. I'm happy to say that, right? My kids are just the best. I got a great wife. So we're very, very happy. We're happy. Everyone's going to be happy pretty soon, which is what we're going to talk about. We're talking about how close we are today to getting out of all of the World War III misery, right? The misery of World War III. And we're going to see just how close we are to living in a golden age, right? We're very close. It's unbelievably this close to the golden age. It would be one of those things like if we don't make it, right? In history, they'll say, oh, geez, if they just, they were so close, right? So we're there. Before we get into that, we got to start with our Moscow time. What is the fakest news I can find? I love this word. Instead of hyper Bitcoinization, call it hyper happyinization. Thank you, Bitcoin Graffiti. We're very happy with that word. All right, so this is from Susan Delacourt for the Toronto Star. I only mention her name because I've met her many times. She is truly one of the stupidest people I've ever met in my life, ever. And I've hung out with her a bunch, right? She was one of these wino ladies in the press gallery in Canada, so she'd be tipping the wine, and she was like one of these middle-aged wino ladies. So she didn't hate when I came around. I was a young man back then, right? I was afraid of her. She was like a drunk aunt. So just one of the most wretched human beings you're going to come across, right? Like one of these smiling ladies who just is writing all this stuff. So this is what she says. America's far right is operating in Canada. Why don't we consider that foreign interference? Foreign interference if there's a Trump fan, right? This one's really good, guys. CTV News, another Canadian outlet. Remember what I say right now. You get a little extra Moscow time because I still, have people on Twitter that are Canadian that I follow. So I get a little bit more Canadian influence. But this should be a note to prove or at least support my argument that Canadians are the dumbest people in the modern world. I bet you if I paid attention to the New Zealand stuff, I could probably get crazier Moscow time, or probably Australians are stupider. I just don't have as much access. Now, we know the sum total of idiot Americans is higher than idiot Canadians because the country's much bigger, right? But overall proportion, they're pretty dumb. So this is a good one. CTV News, right? Could climate change affect your eyes? Canadian study finds higher temperatures linked with vision impairment. Oh no. Oh no. Can't see. This one's my favorite, guys. This is from UK. They could make a run for stupidest too. They really could. Like it would be a heavyweight title between the Canadians and the British people and the Americans, but this one's amazing, right? If there was a heavyweight title and a British person pulled this out because their country was ahead, they'd win. So here's what it is. UK Cancer Trust suggests bonus hole as a term for vagina. It's a bonus hole. No kidding, that's a headline. The more inclusive terms are offered in the Cancer Trust LGBT glossary. Bonus holes, yay! Not kidding. No word of a lie. Bonus hole. All right, now here we go. This is the best one, right? This is the best one. Yeah, Irish, she said. You forgot about Irish. The only thing I'll say about the Irish is they're just cynical enough, just beaten down enough that they might not be as stupid. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Australia and New Zealand are in the top 5 stupidest countries for sure. Enmity, come on. You know it's true. All right, but this is it. This is our last Moscow time entrance, and it is chef's kiss. It's beautiful because it's a be careful what you wish for thing, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about be careful what you wish for. So here's what it is. This is from Paul Mason is his name. Paul Mason, he says, opinion. No one who holds wrong opinions should have a bank account. And yes, Nigel Farage, I'm talking about you, right? A bank account is a privilege, not a right. No one whose views are on the right of mind should be allowed to have one. Okay. So now I didn't read the whole article, so maybe he was being facetious. I don't think he was. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm falling for a trick here. But let's just talk about what he asked for, right? That no one who holds wrong opinions should have a bank account. Okay, well, this is a be careful what you wish for situation because indeed, no one who has opinions around here should have a bank account. No one here. If you have opinions that are wrong or fit in here, if you have a bank account, you need to go to Canada immediately. And when you're in Canada, they got medicine and you can take it and it will maybe help your problems, right? You can get made. So, this idea of be careful what you wish for, right? And you might just get it. You might just get it. So whatever he's asking for here, that these people shouldn't have bank accounts, of course, in the future, if in a Bitcoin standard era, his state will be exactly true, right? He will get what he wants. He will absolutely get what he wants. And that be careful what you wish for, be careful what you put out there, because things have a habit of gathering their own steam and their own energy and metastasizing and snowballing and changing, right? And I've thought about this for a long time. I am one of these people who believes that whatever you sort of put out there and ask the universe to provide for you, you will get it. Now, be careful. Be careful, because when you get the thing you want, it might be totally different. And this first story of the day, this is pretty much the only relevant news out there from the American perspective this weekend, because as I said, everyone's on vacation and what's going on. But because everyone's on vacation, the Biden administration on Friday night did something crazy, crazy, right? They went out and they re-censored or reclassified, I guess you could say reclassified, did not adhere to the Freedom of Information Act that was on top of it, which is the JFK files. The last of the JFK assassination report files are going to be reclassified and not divulged as they ought to have been. So Robert Kennedy comes out and said, it's not a conspiracy. It's not about conspiracy. It's about transparency. In a midnight Friday night announcement, the White House has delivered the bad news that President Biden will be maintaining secrecy indefinitely on some JFK assassination-related records. The assassination was 60 years ago. What national security secrets could possibly be at risk? What are they hiding? The White House announcement is unlawful. In 1992, the JFK Records Act was passed unanimously by Congress, with the promise that all assassination-related records would be released no later than October 2017. This promise has broken once again with this midnight announcement. Public trust in government is at an all-time low. Releasing these records would be a small but significant step toward regaining that trust. And now everyone talking about why is it secret again and what's going on here. Now, here's what I have to say about it. And remember, when I first started talking about RFK Jr. and predicted his emergence on the scene in America, I had no idea about Bitcoin related stuff. I had no idea he was coming to the Bitcoin magazine show in May. I hoped he would. I was starting to pay attention. I was starting to predict he'd be into Bitcoin, not because I had any idea about his opinions or anything like that. None of it, right? None of it. I started talking about him because in my worldview, in the way I see history, in the way I understand and interpret the 20th century, I see the JFK assassination as the end of the golden age, the fourth turning frame, right? So the fourth turning frame that you would use to understand the last 80 years in American history, all the way back to the Second World War, you'd see that from the Second World War to the JFK assassination, not quite 20 years, but in the fourth turning model, of course, we're dealing with 80-year history cycles, and in each 80-year history cycle, there are history blocks of about 20 years, and about this time that it takes for a generation to mature. And so the golden age, so each of these 80-year blocks divided into four, right? A golden age, an awakening, an unraveling, and a crisis. And the unwakening begins and the golden age ends in 1963 when JFK is assassinated, right? So that is the beginning of the awakening, where all of the things that weren't true about the golden age being a golden age start to manifest and rise to the surface and can't be suppressed anymore and can't be hidden and any of those things. So my theory about why RFK was going to become an important story was only based on this fourth turning model, as well as the actual turning from unraveling into crisis, which is the financial crisis of 2008. So the 1963 JFK assassination is linked to the 2008 financial crisis in an important way, which is they are both curtains, let's say, curtains on one of these history blocks, right? So they're both curtains on a history block. So when I started seeing people talk about the JFK assassination, I said, well, it's important because it does fit into this whole 80-year turning where Bitcoin also comes in because of the financial crisis. And if you remember the weird little quirk of history, the weird, strange little thing that I saw, and this is where the be careful what you wish for piece becomes so relevant, right? So remember, be careful what you wish for, you're going to get it, right? Happens like this. So I knew the QAnon story was absolutely intelligence from day one, right? That this was a plant, that this was typical tradecraft where you can see a true story. In this case, that there was some form of hiding of something going on in the American government, and that Trump was on top of it and going after it, deep state, more or less, right? The deep state argument that Trump constantly made that he never lived up to. So this is not a Trump is great thing that I'm trying to mention, right? But there was this idea that Trump was after some of the deep state folks and that he was going to get them. And the JFK assassination was a part of that. He never divulged the truth, right? We can remember he was a failure on that, and he was a failure in the last day in office when he didn't let out Assange and Snowden and Ross, the very people that would help him spin this tale, promote this tale, tell his side of the story. He didn't do it, right? So major failure. We'll never forget it. But the thing is about the QAnon story, which was always fake. But remember, the tradecraft piece is you put a little bit of fakeness into a real story, and then you dilute it, and you use that fakeness in order to deny the entire story, right? So that's a very typical tradecraft technique. And the mistake that was made, and the be careful what you wish for piece that I always thought was interesting, was the following. In the truly fake version of the story that I believe was used to mislead Trump supporters, MAGA people, to put them down a line, to put them down a path where they would be seen as conspiratorial, crazy, and all that, which was part of what the QAnon management was about, right? QAnon was to manage people into a place where their story was incredulous, to take credibility away from the whole story. Part of the QAnon story, part of the QAnon, how would I explain? What word would I use? The QAnon deception or strategy or whatever it was that the deep state was up to, putting that story out and trying to find a way to infiltrate MAGA places, MAGA corners, right, with this crazy story, was the following, right? The thing that was so ludicrous, the sort of tell about what was wrong with this story was the following, that JFK Jr. was still alive. Right. This is a real part of the QAnon story, by the way, right? That JFK Jr. was still alive, and that in all this stuff around January 6th and what was going on, and Trump coming back, and is he still the president? And there was a lot of crazy stuff. He hadn't lost the election. He was about to win. He was about to arrest all of these pedophiles and all this stuff, right? QAnon really went straight down that road, right? In their story, JFK Jr. was supposed to be still alive, and he was going to come out of hiding and help Trump. Right now, of course, I warned everyone in the time leading up to QAnon and January 6th that it was obviously fake. You should stay far away from that. And whether or not pieces of it are real, it looked like a setup to me. And indeed, when we see what happens on January 6th, now, I don't know if they're connected, right? I don't know how many people were led into that, how many people were tricked into it. But we've seen before that the deep state knows how to lure, entice, trick. And it looks like this story was just too juicy for some people to stay away. This JFK Jr. is a part of the Trump thing, right? Yeah, PSYOP. Thank you, Daniel. PSYOP. Yes. There was another word out there, but I couldn't remember it. So this whole PSYOP, right, opened up a weird situation where it sounded crazy, right? JFK Jr., and you put him there, and and it will, in fact, make people sound insane when they repeat it, and it will discredit everything else they say. True, right? True. It seemed to have worked, right? People still think that everyone involved in January 6th, you can still talk to all kinds of low information people out there, and they'll still say, oh, you mean the insurrection, right? The insurrection. So there's still, QAnon is, of course, still a punchline. I don't think that's going to change necessarily. But here's the thing, right? Hold on. What is more likely, JFK Jr. coming back to life or Hillary knocking him off? So, of course, the tie-in here, everyone, the tie-in here, in case you didn't see it, because a lot of people don't actually know about this. JFK Jr., in fact, was running to be, rumored to be running for U.S. Senate seat from the state of New York in the 2002 election, right? 2002, because it was a midterm. And of course, he would have been a candidate against Hillary Clinton, right? Hillary Clinton won the election, probably would never have beaten JFK Jr., right? JFK Jr., just, if anyone out there, right, just pause on your thoughts of Trudeau for a second about what you dislike about Justin Trudeau, because he is one of the stupidest, most dislikable people you'll ever come across in your life. Absolutely annoying. The way he speaks bores a hole into my brain. I can't listen. Do you know that I haven't listened to a word he said since he was elected because I can't handle it. I can't handle his voice. I have to avoid it. His voice in French, oh my God. He sounds absolutely rock bottom stupid when he speaks French. You wouldn't believe it, right? So I can't listen to his voice, his inflections, everything about it bothers me. So I've tuned him off since he was elected. But you got to admit his good sides, right? His good side. Some people say handsome, charismatic, and he's got that princely thing going for him because his father, of course, was a prime minister. None of it compares to what JFK Jr. had going. The good sides of Trudeau still dwarfed by those same good traits shared by JFK Jr. Much more handsome, much more charismatic, much better public speaker, It wasn't even close, right? It wasn't even close, these two. And so you could see right away that there was probably no stopping him, probably no stopping him. And if you even go back in history, you'll see that him and Trump were really good friends. They would go to sports ball things together. They would hang out. I didn't know any of that stuff. And you'd see Trump even speaking very well of JFK Jr. when they were friends, right? Trump sort of sought him out to be friends with him. And so that there is a bit of history between the two of them. But here's the thing, right? When this story was crafted, or whoever came up with the psyop was playing with fire, because in the end, they put probably the story most Americans are curious about, right? The JFK thing transcends political division. All Americans have this huge void in their imagination, even in their just factual historical narrative that they keep in their head. Everyone has a question mark there. Everyone has a void. Nature abhors a vacuum. It abhors it. It hates vacuums. And because so much is left so confused and uncertain around the JFK story, by tying those stories together, Trump and JFK, they did an incredible disservice to their ability to manage the psyop, because you put out a welcome mat for everyone to be interested. So when I first got into RFK, it had nothing to do with RFK. Now, I had followed RFK earlier, since the pandemic, basically. I knew about RFK way back from when I was really young, because he was involved in river preservation in Quebec. You know, I don't know if you know about Quebec's the amount of rivers in Quebec that are just amazing. It's sort of the best place in the world for whitewater rafting and kayaking and canoeing, and not even close, actually. The amount of rivers that are just the best. And there was one in particular that is just apparently so unique and so amazing, and it was going to get turned into a hydro dam, and he was involved in it. So I had some understanding of who he was before. But I saw the vaccine stuff. So I've been paying attention to him since he came up out of the vaccine story. But here's the thing. When the JFK news started to become interesting about this file, I said, well, this is probably going to keep him in the news, right? He's probably going to be able to draft behind this JFK story and get a ton of amplification. He can more or less take the position in some way of what JFK Jr. could have been, right? And so this appetite for knowing what happened with the JFK assassination, he becomes the vessel. RFK becomes the vessel for it. And so people would come around and are going to keep asking and wondering what's going on. And indeed, I think we get cognitive closure. We understand where the 20th century went awry and where America went awry if we look close enough in the JFK story, because it's starting to become very clear that he was killed by internal forces, by the deep state, more or less, right? I don't think that's even in question anymore, that the deep state was involved in this, and that the implications are the ability for America to get out of the quagmire we're in and to actually rejuvenate the country is entirely tied to the JFK story. It's entirely tied, right? It was a major shift in American consciousness. And indeed, the story of Bitcoin doesn't go back to 1971, as many people say. It's not just the gold standard, right? It's not just, oh, you got off the gold standard and what. No, it goes back to 1964. In 1964, that's where the banking sector was deputized by the deep state in order to find out, why are people complaining about the JFK thing? Where's the money to look into this coming from? Where are the questions around the Gulf of Tonkin coming from? Because remember, JFK was not going to Vietnam. If you listen to what RFK is saying now, RFK is giving us a vantage point to understand the times we're in today when he goes back to the 1963 discussions, because he'll talk about the last 1,000 days of his life, and those 1,000 days being him, JFK, at war with the CIA and the deep state around Cuba and other questions. So the minute that starts, the minute we see that he didn't trust them, they were luring him into the Bay of Pigs, they were luring him into more international arenas for the military. The minute we found out about all of that stuff, he realized that he probably wasn't going to win that fight, and started keeping secrets from them, started doing things around their back, which they were not happy about, until inevitably in the end of 1963, it was over. In 1964, you had to keep cleaning up the mess, right? So now we're in Vietnam, which he was not going to do. He was not going to put a soldier on the ground in Vietnam. When he found out they had soldiers on the ground in Vietnam without his permission, he lost his mind. He was furious with the CIA lying to him about Green Berets being there. And he said, how many have died? I want a full casualty list. This was days before he died. Now, RFK knows all of this, and RFK is always talking about this context now. So he's got this story in his pocket that people will never, ever, ever change the channel for, ever. They want to know what happened. They want to hear him say it. And RFK even has a really interesting story about it all. He was talking about it on Bill Maher the other day. That video already has millions of viewers, by the way, which I predicted that the Bill Maher podcast would go viral, and it has. Little clips have come out, and the whole thing has gone viral. Individual clips have gone viral. So that has been shared. That's been RFK's most widely shared content of the week. And we do love Bill Maher, right? He's one of those liberals. You got to give him respect. I more or less agree with the world he would like to see, even though I probably disagree with him on many policies to get there, but still one of those honest broker people on the liberal side of things that you just, there's not many of them. So when they're there, you got to call them out and invite other people to listen to what they have to say with the normal amount of skepticism, right? With the normal, I'm not saying go listen to everything Bill Maher says. He's wrong about a lot, but you know where he's coming from, and at least you can give respect to the point of view that he has, which I do. So he had RFK on, and they were talking exactly about these things, right? About RFK's own maturity around the subject. He believed the story just like that, right? When he was young, but only after did he start seeing that it maybe wasn't all true. And then finally, with his own father, when his own father was assassinated, he, of course, still believed that it was Sirhan. It was about Israel and Palestine, right? So let me just see where some of these comments are. I saw some of these about Israeli intelligence, Clout Casino. I'm still trying to figure out who ordered Jack Rubenstein. Jack Ruby, yeah. Rubenstein, yeah, I guess they do call him Jack Rubenstein. You don't have to figure it out. It's very simple. So Jack Ruby, you know how Nixon knows Clout Casino? Nixon knows because Nixon was offered help when he was still vice president. So Nixon was the vice president before Kennedy ran for the presidency. Nixon was Eisenhower's vice president for the entire 1950s. And Nixon had met Jack Ruby in the 1950s and remembered him because he was one of LBJ's fixers in Texas. So what it looks like happened with Jack Ruby. So Jack Ruby wakes up after he shoots Oswald and doesn't know where he is, doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't know what's going on. Sounds a lot like an MK Ultra situation, right? Now, I don't know any of it, but it sounds like it. And that's why the MK Ultra psychologist handler is the person who went to meet Jack Ruby and said, no, he can't even be interviewed, right? He can't talk to this guy. So he ended up being declared totally mentally insane after he shoots him. So, but that's exactly what MK Ultra was experimenting with, right? How do you get mind control over people to get them to do things like this? So I think what you have here is someone who LBJ knew you could just donate to science, more or less. So Nixon always believed LBJ did it, or at least knew who did it, because of Ruby. And that's how Roger Stone wrote the book about the deep state and LBJ knocking Kennedy. Because Roger Stone is as close to anyone in the world to Richard Nixon. He has Nixon tattooed on his back. He's a very big Nixon supporter. He's the guy the FBI came in with the guns and everything when they had like they got a hot tip, right? And they were there to film when he was arrested. He's the Trump collusion, right? He was part of that. So Roger Stone, very eccentric fella. He's the one now calling for the cross ticket of RFK and Trump, by the way. That's been his, he's putting that energy out in the world. Probably tied to this QAnon thing, right? He knows how this stuff works. So he knew who Jack Ruby was. And Nixon, in his time with Roger Stone, said, yeah, the LBJ, the Jack Ruby thing is what tipped me. It was the Jack Ruby. Now, the the case of RFK is a little more directly related to Israel, but I don't think it actually is, right? So Sirhan said, "Oh, I'm a Palestinian," blah 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 blah, and it was the 1 year anniversary of the Yom Kippur War where Sirhan shot RFK, and apparently RFK had just given a big speech in support of Israel or weapons. He wanted to sell them some planes or something like that. And so this Sirhan guy got all excited. So he ends up, when they catch him, he's got like the actual newspaper article of RFK talking about Israel Palestine like folded in his pocket, right? Anyway, RFK has looked at they call it the perfect autopsy because RFK did get a perfect autopsy. This is all new information to me. I learned from RFK. I didn't know this before. Because the autopsy was so botched on JFK, RFK had his own autopsy done by the best autopsy guy in the world, in America. And when he brought all of the coroners from the various divisions of American military to observe him so that they knew no mistakes were made. And we know he was shot from behind, which is impossible because Sirhan was in front of him. And all of Sirhan's bullets are accounted for. So the deep state theory is he was killed by the CIA guy behind him. And that's why the shots were behind. And he pulls the tie off of him because that's where he's getting... he knows the shots are coming from behind. It was a diversion, basically. Sirhan didn't know. He wasn't in on like the plot, right? He's still in jail, I think, Sirhan. Or anyway, he was until he might have died. I'm not sure what's going on. But I know RFK did go meet him. RFK did go to the prison and has forgiven him. He doesn't believe he did it, right? He's read the autopsy. And he reluctantly did so, RFK. He was lured and dragged by friends of his father who said, you have to know. You can't go on thinking it was Sirhan. So in his life, he has come to realize it was not Sirhan and has accepted that it could indeed be this vast story of the deep state stuff. So we don't know, right? We don't know, but that's what he's saying. The point, though, is that the appetite for this truth is going to make things super interesting this year. And remember, what Bitcoin, and here's how Bitcoin fits in, and we're going to talk about all the other good news coming, but here's what it comes down to. So we talk about the breakup, right? That's why we call this. It's the psychological frame of ending a relationship. It's not about like, oh, I didn't know Bitcoin's supply was fixed. Now I'm going to change my mind. Now that I learned more about Bitcoin, I'm going for Bitcoin, right? It's not exactly how it works. Not exactly. It's the disillusionment with the old system that is more persuasive for Bitcoin's case. That's why we call this show the breakup, and we're telling you why you'd want to sell dollars, not buy Bitcoin, right? The show is about why you'd want to sell dollars. It's nothing to do with why you should buy Bitcoin. Now, the logical thing is if you're selling dollars, where do you end up? So the Bitcoin thing becomes super important, right? And we obviously talk about what Bitcoin does for alignment of your own personality, the psychological benefits of Bitcoin. We love all that stuff. But really, that's after we start talking about what's wrong with the current system that we're in. And so this piece is really important. And the reason why it's going to become super important is the following, right? Remember how I said it's easier to trick people than to convince them that they've been tricked? Well, when you do want to convince someone they've been tricked, right? You can still do it. It doesn't mean it's impossible, right? It's easier to trick people than to convince them they've been tricked. It's a Mark Twain said. We're going to be doing 2 Mark Twain quotes today. There's that one, and then we can't tell the difference between good news and bad news, the other one. So this easier to trick people than to convince them they're tricked, but you can convince them they've been tricked. What you need, though, in order to make it work and click is that it can't really be their fault, and they have to have an easy way to excuse why they've been tricked. So all the trickery that's happened since JFK, right? We're going to see that everything with the vaccine, almost everything we know about America since the 1960s will have some strain of the JFK story attached to it. It could just be that the deep state managed things more than you thought. But basically the narrative exposition and the guiding and herding of humanity with these narratives and stories needs to be excused. You need a reason that's simple for people to understand and that they can get behind in order to excuse their failure or to excuse the embarrassment about being deceived, right? And so what in the end allows for people to do this so easily? In the end, it's going to be money. It's going to be follow the money, right? People are going to blame the financial system for being lied to, right? And once you start doing that, once you start seeing that the secrecy and the deputization of banks and the integration of the deep state and the banks go back to the JFK and Vietnam stories, you're going to be able to give people a very easy narrative. The money was used to lie to you, and you were deceived by people manipulating money about these very important things. We're going to see why you don't want state and money related in this way. The excuse, the fake excuse, but the excuse that people are going to use to embrace Bitcoin is going to be the hatred of the connection of the state and money that led to decades of being lied to, And that cognitive closure, that appetite for cognitive closure is going to make it popular to denounce the dollar, popular to denounce state and financial collusion. In the same way that this guy says, no one, remember Paul Mason, what he said, no one who holds wrong opinions should have a bank account. This is going to be a very positive statement in the future. You're going to say, yeah, of course. It's not going to sound, right now we take a statement like this and we say, I'm being threatened. No, you're not being threatened. You're being, this is a compliment, right? This is a compliment, not a threat. It's a compliment. And it's going to become obviously a compliment as we go forward. And starting, today already, we see it amongst Bitcoiners already, right? Now, I do not have any answers on what happened to JFK, really. I have parts of the story and all that stuff. I think there's still going to be surprises out there. I think we get the gist of it, right? But this is not about what exactly happened. It's about what will happen as the appetite continues to grow for this story to be made public and to be shared. We're not going to be able to stop talking about it for the next year. And RFK is in the perfect position to continue to use the lightning rod of attraction that this story brings to the world to push it forward. So now, if you think about this, sort of idea that within a short amount of time, the president who is so synonymous with the golden age of America, and everything in the first turning of the 80-year cycle when it was the golden age, the one who is most associated with convertibles and Mustangs and rock and roll and Ray-Ban sunglasses and everything that we have come to associate the later 20th century American culture with, is going to come into play in this story and allow people to start, having a real way of understanding the past few years, and also the perfect excuse to politically support the separation of money and state. And it will be very easy to understand. It's not, they lied to you using the manipulation of money, and everything you've learned about the last 50, 60 years of American history is all fake. It's totally fake, right? Totally fake. The deception there is going to be great enough to demand huge change, which is coming soon. So we're not talking about Bitcoin standard in 80 years of enough people hodl. Nope. Now, happening now, currently in our lifetime. And just look at this tweet from War Clandestine. So remember everything that's about to change, the appetite for change, the mistake of tying the Kennedy name to Trump and then saying, oh, they're crazy. And then bang, right? The biggest conspiracy theory is now tied to everything Trump is doing. The appetite is only going to grow. I continue to predict you're only ever going to see friendly banter between RFK and Trump. They both understand the war at issue here, and I think are going to continue to be running into these front lines and pushing the story out. So here's what War Clandestine says about tomorrow's July 4th and everything we're at. And take the story that we just talked about, and I'm going to tell you why every one of the things he lists here is actually on the cusp of being perfect. So or at least much better. So here's what he says: War clandestine, who we love, right? I think he destroyed that Aubrey, whatever that Huff guy, Dr. Huff, right? The one who said, oh, scam, looks like he's a scam. So we were worried about that months ago. It looks like War clandestine's a guy. This is what he says: I don't know about y'all, but I'm in no mood to celebrate the USA. Too many problems to fix. So he says media, tech, academia, pharma, agriculture, intelligence, justice, entertainment. All our institutions have been infiltrated and corrupted. Our society is failing. What are we celebrating? We're celebrating the end of this shit. The society is failing, but there's a new one right behind it. So let me explain what the new one looks like, right? So here we go. Media, right? So he says, I'm not celebrating because media is corrupted. Well, here's what we get from the Fox today, right? Fox's number one story yesterday, not today, yesterday, but still number one story. Elon Musk under fire from Twitter users for limiting posts that can be read. He picked a fight with America, Musk said. Post reading limit was temporary. So if you guys didn't catch this on Twitter, Elon Musk did a rate limiting thing where blah, 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 some hilarious jokes coming out of it. I'm not wasting one of my 600 rationed tweets, right? So it's a tweet rationing thing. Blue checks get 6,000, no 600, something like that, right? But I don't care about the Twitter part, right? Forget about the Twitter performance. I haven't noticed anything and I really don't care. It's the idea, though, that Fox has to put this Twitter story number one. Why is it number one? Why? Because Twitter is that big of a threat. If it's just about a website not working, well, but here we're talking about news networks that understand who's stealing their audience. It turns out that Twitter is by far the most used social network, not by number of people, but by hours on the site by the people who use it. And it's not even close. It's not even close, right? By far the most used website for news information in this context. And as we understand that the mainstream news is really just what's going on Twitter, right? Here, we're not mainstream news, but this show is mostly what's going on Twitter, right? I mean, I go on other sources, but it's a lot of Twitter. So that it was the first thing that Fox complained about shows exactly how important Twitter's become. And in many ways, when War Clandestine here is talking about the problems to fix, well, I mean, it might be fixed. And then you got Noster right after it, right? I'm not worried about media anymore, right? News media. I think we already won. Now, when it wasn't Elon Musk in charge of Twitter, I would have been more worried. But I think the fight is won, right? Then he says tech, right? He says tech is another thing that we shouldn't be happy about, or what's going on. Oh, here's an even better one about media before I go on, right? This is great. So finally, right? Finally. It looks like the Democrats are going to abandon the Bidens. It looks like that they've had enough, right? And even the mainstream media. This is a headline in the New York Times, guys. Finally, imagine Hunter Biden's daughter and a tale of two families. The story surrounding the president's grandchild in Arkansas, who has not yet met her father or her grandfather, is about money, corrosive politics, and what it means to have the Biden birthright. So finally hearing stories about the illegitimate granddaughter and that maybe Biden isn't such a swell guy after all, right? You're seeing it in the New York Times. In the New York Times. This is not someone on Twitter, right? This is Katie Rogers, and she's from Arkansas. There is a 4-year-old girl in rural Arkansas who is learning to ride a camouflage pattern 4-wheeler alongside her cousins. Some days she wears a bow in her hair, and on other days she threads her long blonde ponytail through the back of a baseball cap. When she is old enough, she will learn to hunt, just like her mother did when she was young. The girl is aware that her father is Hunter Biden and that her paternal grandfather is the president of the United States. She speaks about both of them often, but she has not met them. Her maternal grandfather, Rob Roberts, described her as whip-smart and funny. I may not be the POTUS, Mr. Roberts said in a text message using an acronym for the president, but he said he would do anything for his granddaughter, right? So there you go. Actually talking about it now, right? Actually getting in there and talking about these things. So that's got to count for something, right? Now, another one about media, right? You can take this one for what you will, but I think it's important, right? So Trump gave a huge speech yesterday in South Carolina, and old Lindsey Graham tried to get up and introduce Trump. I don't know if you guys saw it. Lindsey Graham gets booed. All right, he can't speak. He doesn't make it 5 minutes on stage, and in the end, everyone in the crowd just turns their back to him. They boo him, and he doesn't listen. He tries to speak over them, and then they just turn their backs on him, right? So again, remember how appreciative we are of Trump destroying the Republican Party, right? That's great, right? It looks like the Bidens can help do the same to the Democrats, especially with RFK there. RFK will be as effective in altering the course of the Democrat Party as Trump was for the Republican Party. So instantly we can see with the media's ability to keep the two red and blue parties separated in fake prison of two idea choices about everything is exploding before their eyes. It won't be possible anymore. And it's clearly becoming less possible every day. How many people were divided about, some of these recent things like we saw the media, normally the big catastrophes, they get all kinds of attention. The Russia coup, nobody watched, right? So they're losing their power to divide people. And it's hard to not say that we're actually getting over it, right? That you can have someone like Lindsey Graham, an actual warmonger, booed by his own party that much. That is one of the best things that's ever happened to America. Like I can't think of a more recent thing that is better than that, right? And we're seeing it on both parties here, right? So now that the New York Times is talking about the illegitimate granddaughter, Lindsey Graham is getting booed, right? All great stuff. All great stuff. Oh, did you see there's these new pictures of Hunter that came out too? He's driving 172 miles an hour in Vegas, smoking crack. It's in the news, right? It's in the news. They're actually reporting on it, right? They're actually reporting on it. Even the Biden story, Jonathan Turley says here, aides have been told that the Bidens have 6, not 7 grandchildren. So aides in the White House, right, is breathtakingly cruel to this little girl. However, the first couple continues to cultivate their image as loving, doting grandparents as they shun this little girl, right? This is going to hurt them going forward. It has to be. It has to hurt them, right? Now that people are talking about it. It was bad when people weren't talking about it, but now that they're talking about it. The story around, well, here's even media on the war, like again about this pitting people against each other, right? So Zelensky gets an interview the day, and he goes on television and says, and CNN is reporting it, right? That Zelensky is there saying that the only problem they have right now in Ukraine is not Russia or anything. It's they're worried that Republicans aren't continuing to fund them. So it's people, he actually calls the Republican Party by name, saying they're not funding him. Well, again, you're going to have a lot more trouble with Democrats going forward too, right? A guy like Kennedy is going to be able to bring up the anti-war sentiment within Democrats, and all of these terrible things that have happened before is going to just pile on. I don't think there's going to be an aggregate demand to be in Ukraine much longer, right? And he's got to call out politicians now as if that's his major problem, right? So that's going to continue, and I can't imagine it going away. Then so go back to Clandestine's list, your media, academia, he says, right? Academia. Well, didn't we just have all that stuff settled in the past couple of days? So there's going to be, they're going to continue with the affirmative action. Remember we said don't even pay attention, right? It doesn't matter, right? Because even the way that the universities jumped in and said, oh, we're happy to agree with the judgment right away, right? They saw the workaround. Everyone saw the workaround. The workaround was very clear. It meant nothing. If you believe that the universities are just going to change, you're wrong, right? And I think more and more people are realizing that there's even sort of there's a couple funny things to the story that I think are going to be able to be real fodder for humor in the future, which is always deadly. If you're getting laughed at, it's very deadly. First of all these, and this is my why it bothers me that so many conservatives, let's say, think this is a super important issue, right? Do you know which black kids are getting the affirmative actions? It's all the conservative kids. It's, of course it is. It's not like, it's not, anyway, that's another point. But this is the funniest one, right? So this is the Atlantic, a eulogy for the world that affirmative action made, right? But isn't it amazing that people are terrified that white elite liberals are now, right, with this thing, are going to shut out other people because of the color of their skin? There's no conservatives in any of these universities, by the way, right, running any of the administrations. They're trying to blame MAGA for kicking them out, right? But who's in charge of these places anyway? They're going to have a workaround. People are going to laugh about it. It won't matter. But it's focusing the conversation, right? Because academia is a completely is a wasteland. It's not going to be that in the future. We're not going to change academia. We're not going to do any of those things. It's just finished, right? Rotten to the core. And there's better systems out there to teach people anyway. And especially with technology coming online and everything that's going on with that, we're going to have no problem with AI and all these other things, right? Schools existed because the books, we needed a place to put the books, and you went to the book depository, and there's another JFK thing, book depository, right? The only other time you'll use that word, book depository, right? So the book depository thing, both in the JFK story and now, not a motivating factor anymore, right? It's not why you have to go to school. The books are in the air. You can get them anywhere. And so we're not going to have to go to the schools, but it's focusing, I think, the question on the important part, which is where you do want a lot of work done in education, which is the younger ages, because by the time they're in college anyway, you're not fixing much, right? You're not fixing much. You can do it when people are young. So the real thing is to get quality education to every American who's young, everyone in the world, right? But let's start here and figure it out. So education, academia getting fixed, right? Pharma is on clandestine's list. Well, I don't think anything could have put such a mortal wound into big pharma as COVID did. And again, you've got all kinds of candidates now. It's becoming more and more politically, the political literacy around pharma way higher than it ever was, way higher, right? I would never have stopped my kids from getting all these vaccinations until COVID. I'd have said, well, I understand people complain, right? But now they're not getting anything, nothing, right? I wouldn't have done that even 4 years ago, right? So pharma changing before eyes. People are aware of the collusion between media and big pharma, Washington and big pharma. They're becoming less naive. He says here, agriculture is another reason, right? Agriculture, clandestine. I don't want to celebrate the agricultural thing. Well, again, when I go out here in Vermont, and when I talk to Bitcoiners, the appetite for anything but industrial farming is growing and growing and growing, right? He says intelligence, right? Clandestine says intelligence community. Well, again, the JFK story is going to be enough to completely rip it out root and stem. I think it's over after this. I think the deep state actually will be drained, right? The swamp. He says the justice, right? Well, again, our capacity for change, because we're about to be shocked about the stuff we've been lied to about, we'll change that. And then he finally puts entertainment, right? Well, what happened this weekend in entertainment? Well, again, Indiana Jones didn't get $60 million at the box office this weekend. 60 million, okay? The last one that came out 15 years ago, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, terrible movie, got 100 and something, right? In its own money, in the 2008 financial crisis money, pre-financial crisis money. It made more money at the box office than the new one. The new one, so in terms of people attending, is probably a third of attendees from the last one. And it's not going to come anywhere near what it needs. It needs to make about $700 or $800 million to turn a profit. It's not even going to get to 100 million in its first week, which means second week is a 50% drop off minimum, right? And then it just keeps having. It's not probably going to make $200 million. Maybe. But for all intents and purposes, it's dead. It's going to be yanked from theaters soon. You had the Flash movie that came out a few weeks ago that had a better opening weekend and is already pulled from theaters 3 weeks after its release. And I can't imagine this Indiana Jones movie making it much longer than that. Disney, one failure after another. There is a limit to how much they can fail. They're firing people all over. Who's going to watch any of these movies? They've killed Lucasfilm. It's dead. I, as the biggest Star Wars fan when I was younger, loved Indiana Jones. I went Indiana Jones, the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. All right. I was getting back from Israel. I had just gone to Israel for like 2 weeks. I just graduated law school. I went to Israel for 2 weeks. I can still remember it coming out. And my plane landed, and my wife was at work at the time. The very woman I've married was working at the time, 2008. I had a couple hours to kill before I went over to her place, and I went to the movie. Like, that's the first thing I did when I got off a flight. Imagine the first thing I did to kill time too. But I'm not going to see this. I'm not going to go see this movie. All right. No way. Like, who's going to watch this stupid thing? We already got we already know what they do in every one of these movies, right? They're terrible. So entertainment finished. This is not going anywhere. We're going to have a whole rejuvenation of this stuff, and Bitcoiners are going to be the ones behind it. And if that's not perfect, right? If that's not perfect, well, this is something we found out today. If it isn't enough to convince you that we're on the cusp of a golden age, well, let me tell you about a product that just came for sale. This is a $300,000 electric flying car. It's finally here, guys. The flying car is here. It's from SpaceX backed startup. It's going to cost $300K. You got to see it. It's amazing. It's not exactly one of these four, like I always thought it was going to be a 4-wing drone, right? Like a 4 helicopter drone. It's 4 wheels. It looks just like a little roadster. It's got the 2 blades front and back, and it flies. You can fly it. It's going to be in the air for purchase by 2025. And, you know, $300,000. It's probably going to be 1 Bitcoin by then, right? It's probably going to be 1 Bitcoin. We're going to be able to buy flying cars, guys, for a single Bitcoin in a couple of years, right? And I think Bitcoiners are going to be the first with the flying cars for sure. So there you go. We got flying cars on the way. And if there wasn't a better sign that we are making the turn to a new golden age, it's the appearance of these flying cars, because we got to get the flying cars. So we got flying cars coming. We got better movies coming. We got somehow the Kennedy story getting divulged. We got mainstream media melting. We got Disney melting, right? It couldn't be better. We're at the cusp of a golden age, guys. We're at a cusp. We're here. We're going to do it. All right, let's see what the comments say. Why would Israel care about Oswald? Did it have anything to do with JFK not wanting Israel to have nukes? I don't know much about the Israel JFK. I mentioned the Israel RFK. It's a different story, right? I have no understanding that he was involved in JFK's death whatsoever. Cubans, yes. I think RFK is another Ron Paul. He's the one we want, but we'll never get. We'll see, Daniel. Again, this is powerful magic we're dealing with right now, and the appetite people have to get cognitive closure on what happened to his uncle is so great that it's different than Ron Paul. Ron Paul was always kind of academic, right? RFK, we're not dealing with an academic here. We're dealing with someone whose persuasion abilities are as high as Trump's. This is someone who's as high as Trump in his ability to persuade. And all he does is tell the truth. It's amazing, right? It's amazing. So there you go. I was a Ron Paul delegate and tried to get him elected for 8 years in my young adult life. Man, that guy was inspiring and always doing and saying the right thing. He sure was. But again, not as persuasive as RFK or as Trump, right? You gotta. I love the guy, but has some limits. JFK wanted to reinstate the U.S. Treasury as the issuer of currency and get rid of the Fed. That, in my opinion, is what got him. A lot of people think that. Yeah, I think it's just not playing. I think it's the CIA thing. I think it's not playing ball and not wanting to do the forever wars. But that's just me. Wow, that's crazy. Thanks for the info. Yeah. I never heard of the LBJ connection. I'm butchering this info. Maybe. Look, I'm not Bob. I am not a JFK expert. I just think that there's a connection there, right? That's genius. The scapegoat is the system, ignoring the fact that we are complicit in that system. It works nonetheless. Yeah. It's a fake because, Daniel. It's a fake. It allows everyone to keep their pride, which is the problem with the ego-based admissions, right? Like when you have to admit something and your ego won't let you, cognitive dissonance or whatever. Having a scapegoat is real helpful. And the whole JFK thing, the scapegoat can very easily be the 60 years, pardon me, of deception that happened after can be easily explained away in your own mind by realizing the ill effects of government and money being connected so intimately. Cognitive closure. Bitcoin yields that. Yeah, absolutely. It's cognitive closure, Veterans Cannabis Advocacy Group. Exactly. Up Bitcoin. And veterans advocacy. Think about it, right? Even the veterans, they need to know what they did all these years. They've got to have a way to make it make sense. The dollar and Bitcoin can make everything they did make sense, right? Easily. Nice flying and thanks, Clout. Yeah, that's where we're headed, man. He's also the time where we're all figuring out that many of our friends have serious issues thanks to medicine provided the last couple of years. Perfect timing. Agreed with that. Yeah. Does anyone in America really think that like we're doing great with the health? We're not, right? We're not. You ever going to talk about Bitcoin? Well, sometimes we talk about it. Yeah. If you want to go talk about like technical analysis or like what's going on in the markets, go. There's plenty of places for that. Runator. Go check it out. What did the technical analysis say? Plenty of place for that. I'm not even going to go into that content. There's so much, right? Most are completely ignorant of history, especially the last 50 years. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100. Yeah, I always say if you think the news is fake, wait till you get a whole load of history. Thank the CIA for that. Yeah. The creature from Jekyll Island is exactly the permission to break up you're talking about, but goes way back further than the 60s. So Duke, we talk about Jekyll Island all the time. I am trying to produce a Bitcoin show in anticipation of a 2024 US election on Jekyll Island. So we love the book. Agreed, it goes back way further, but I'm not sure that story will stick in people's heads as much as the JFK one. He's trying to put some bigger narratives together and how they, yeah, exactly. Let's celebrate the men who were intelligent kids and had enough divine masculinity to fight to liberate. Yeah, we love those people. Men especially on that level, right? Elon just needs to get rid of the bots. Yeah, they're pretty bad, huh? Pretty bad. Your understanding of QAnon lacks substance and is based on media spin. If you were to actually read the Q post, you would know that Q specifically stated JFK. Oh, sorry, Ron, I don't look. I would never waste my time on specific QAnon posts, only because I see the signs of an op. It's an op, right? I know what ops look like. It's an op. So I'm not going to sift through a bunch of bullshit to find out what's real and what's not. Right. I'm not like that's how you confuse yourself. I'm not saying I have the answers. And I did say, I bet a bunch of the QAnon stuff is true, a bunch, but ops work by associating fake crazy shit, and then poisoning the well. So, that's how I see it. But I appreciate what you say, Ron. I'm not saying I'm not saying that, Chamath says he sees this ruling on affirmative action having a domino effect on ESG. ESG is already dead, Justin. I already think it's a joke, and anyone pushing it is going to come into the same troubles. So Those who have read the Q posts are the ones being victimized. It is as you rely on. Ron, again, I'm not anti-Q. I'm just saying you be careful that you can be. You might think that everyone out there is giving you honest information because it sounds scandalous, but understand how these people operate. I mean, I know. I know. Okay, I know. I've seen it firsthand. If you didn't know, Ron, I worked for the executive branch, have a pretty good idea how these things work, and I've seen them in action many times. Benefited from them blacks by yeah. I love all these people. Joey Reed yesterday, remember that? I only got into Harvard because of affirmative action. Teachers want to teach. Yeah, that's another big part of it. Yeah, teachers want to teach in those areas. Yeah. Unfortunately. Academia would be funded by students realizing there was no value. Yeah, it's also the all that stuff. 4 years ago we all trusted doctors. So I never have. I've been an anti-doctor guy. Not never, but ever since I was a law student and I started getting bitter about like, why are we the bad guys? So like, why can you meme lawyers to being the worst people in the world and you can't with doctors? And I started to understand a lot about that. But you know what I love about doctors? Let me see if I kept the tweet. 1 second. So first of all, do you know that at most banks, they have to have their own financial advisors and stuff? There's like a special division about doctors because of how stupid they are and bad they are with money. So remember that, right? So first of all, very stupid and bad with money. Let me see where I saw this. I had a doctor who said, no matter what, I'm going to keep my kids from being a doctor because basically let me see if I actually saved it. No, I don't think I did. So the point is though, this guy says, I'll never let my kids, he's a doctor. And he says, he said it on Twitter, I'll never let my kids be a doctor. And he's like, you don't make that much money for the amount of work you do. And the work-life balance is terrible. You never see your kids. You never do. No. So I've already known that they were financially illiterate, right? Because you spend enough time with these folks in your social life and you'll find out that they're not, other than like, oh, your arm is broken. Like, they're not good at anything, nothing. And I got a lot of doctor friends, a lot. Some of them are super smart. I'm not talking about their cognitive capacity, right? That's not quality of life and all. You'd have to be kind of dumb in the end. You would like. You want to work 80 hours for like $300,000 a year? Well, have fun. 80 hours a week for $300,000 a year is not a great deal, right? Working 80 hours a week for almost any amount of money is not a great deal. So 300 is so low that I can't imagine it, right? I can't imagine it. So, but that's just me. I love spending time with my family. So there you go. Oh no. Oh no. Terrible clout. Bad story. What replaces college as a place to come of age? Invent your. Well, I do. So when I mentioned that part of colleges the other day, Daniel, I will say that I still think there is a role in there for especially immigrants. I always thought college was great at getting immigrants plugged in America. I'd say if we take care of the younger parts of education, we're not going to need that. But if we don't, we still need a system like this. So I don't predict they're all going to be gone, but I think it'll be more explicitly exactly what you say. A little bit more like, that's why I like the master and apprentice model, because if colleges were a place to come of age that didn't involve alcoholism and being a slob, I would say great, right? So I think it will turn into more of like a make your bed and be on time for things situation, like the military. But it won't be the military. Maybe what they do in, I always loved what they do in Germany and other places, where instead of a year of military service, they make you do a year of public service. And maybe it's that, and yeah, so absolutely, yeah, barcode free diet. That's how I live, Capenta. And indeed, if people don't realize that the grocery stores are as bad as the pharmacies and the banks, then you're not paying attention. I do my best to not go to any grocery stores. One of the reasons why I live in Barbados for the winter, you can farm, you can buy your steaks fresh from a farm. I live in Vermont and Quebec, probably the two most secure local food supply chains on the continent. Very easy for me in Vermont, for example, and Quebec. Both of them remain high trust societies. I can go to farms, and many of them will just have a little garden house at the end of the property. There's no merchant in the building. You can go in, there's a payment terminal, you can take food out, pay on an honor system. It's great, right? It's amazing. And there's only so many places left you can do that, and here's one of them. Why I'm from here also, but that's why I live here, right? That's why I do believe this is the best place in the world to live. Clout says, yeah, had to rush to the hospital. 30 days, terrible. Yeah, it was right at the start, so I never got the shot, he says. I was scared as hell after seeing what happened to him. Yeah. That happened to my friend while driving on a highway, the right side of his body. It's a miracle. Yeah, wow, terrible. I honestly don't know. Maybe we go back to the old apprenticeship ways. It would work from most jobs. Yeah. It might be a case where the government steps in and guts the crap from college. Well, I think part of it is by putting some of the financial burden on them will fix it. Right? I think that'll do. Yes, we know people who just drop dead, even worse. Yeah. When am I gonna buy? When am I going to buy a flying car? I don't know. I hate driving to begin with. I really do. I'm not a big driver. I like driving around here, but I don't know if I'm going to be a pilot. I think I'll continue to like getting rides from other people. So it probably won't be me. Plug the bonus hole. Bonus hole. Yeah. In Mexico, someone goes to the hospital and it's cheap or free. Yeah, I love using the hospital in Barbados. It's so cheap. Won't let your husband get a flying car. Go too fast. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Indeed. Clout wants to trade some SpaceX stock. Yeah, not a bad idea. To Waldorf education. We happen to live near. Yeah, Boo Boo. Yeah, I bet you that's good. Yeah, I've seen some of those. Waldorf school. Yeah. Learn that resources are best applied in the. Yeah, I've spent an unbelievable amount of time with my kids since they were born, more than most fathers in history have, I'd say. So I've been loving that. Yeah, it was the CIA. Heard that nattokinase can help reverse effects. Let's hope lots were placebos, but just in case. Yeah, you saw that big muscle weightlifting guy who died of the shot, but it also, he got it all cleaned out, but he was on the gear, right? He was taking other shots a lot. So I don't buy that it was the COVID in his case. The stars are indeed aligned. Yeah. The stars are indeed aligned. RFK all the way, people are saying. Yeah. Ron Paul, not a Kennedy. Yeah. Well, Kennedy name still matters to the voters, so he has to be. Yeah. I think it does matter. Yeah. I think it does matter. Check out the black fly flying vehicle, supposed to be the price of a top end. Wow, I didn't know that, Vaughn. Well, I think there's going to be a bunch of them. People disenfranchised. Any tips on how to bring in the people who are currently completely disenfranchised by the current political system / climate? Well, that's what I try and do here. That's why I think one of the things you need to get people who are disenfranchised motivated is to get them to be able to imagine the future for themselves. And that's one of Bitcoin's superpowers, is that once you start understanding Bitcoin, it becomes very easy to project and predict a golden age. And you can sort of have a very vivid image of that, right? RFK brings so much. Yeah. Because in advocate, I agree. I love the American history stuff too, Mrs. Calabrese. Would you ever interview people on the show? I would, Capenta, but I don't trust any technology to work as intended. And so I wouldn't, doing it every day, I couldn't interview someone every day, right? That would be too exhausting and difficult and coordinating, and I go early and what would happen and so that doesn't work. But I would have no problem interviewing someone. It's just the tech sucks. But I can do it through Restream. I've done it, and I go on other shows sometimes. So I'm going to leave, and I do interview people at the live events. So we'll see. One day, if I get RFK on, we'll do it. Okay. Maybe I'll ask RFK if he wants to come on the Breakup one morning, and then I'll interview him. That could be a lot of fun. We'll ask him. My sister tipped me off to Ron Paul in 2008. Dr. Paul's message to me was to pay attention to our U.S. Constitution and the Federal Reserve games. He was right about that. He was right about that. Right. ESG is just trying a rebrand. Yeah. Conscientious capitalism. Yeah. All right. Follow the money and education. I'm going to have to run through a bit of these quickly. The food is organic. No need to ask. They laugh when you ask. Yeah, exactly. Hotel got us. Yeah. Oh, I got someone saying in Alabama it's the same. Southeast Alabama the same. I can get any veggies and meat wrap. Beautiful. Great news, George Ryan Walters. Capenta, law is the only thing I would recommend as far as a liberal arts education. It is a liberal arts education. So I went to law school, and what I like about it is that it teaches you can't really put too many politics in the law, right? But what it teaches you is that you can see society, I guess you could say, as an engine, and you're a mechanic now. And you can, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So just for that benefit, 100% worth it. Law school is worth it. Now, don't pay a fortune for it, because you can learn a lot of this stuff on your own, and there's a lot of good classes, and there's a lot of good cheap law schools. So I would have a different impression if I spent a lot of money on it, I bet. Because I don't technically make money as a lawyer or directly related to my degree, but it's a very useful degree. And, there you go. Oh, Cloud Casino going to feed their chickens. There you go. Uh-huh. One of my doctors is an ETH Max. They're very stupid people. They're honestly they're so dumb. Now, I got a lot of really smart doctor friends that everything I'm saying is not true, right? It's not all of them. But I know enough of them that are not smart, right? Too busy being a doctor, too busy having everyone tell them they're smart, so they don't really know why they're not. Right? Whereas a lawyer, by nature and your skills, you argue with everyone around you, and eventually you learn. So one of my superpowers is I know how to say when I'm wrong. I'm one of the rare people that in an argument can change my mind and be convinced. That almost never happens, right? And law helps you have those logical frameworks that can apply. We're not logical beings, though, so don't look to it to change your nature. You'll still be as flawed and stupid as every other human, even if you go to law school. But good tools. All right, team, that's all I got for today. I'll see you all tomorrow for a special 4th of July show, and I'm sure the news will be low quality again and not too much of it, so we might have to have another fun one with flying cars and JFK talk. Thanks, everyone.